We're still live. Okay, we should be live, all being well. So I'm just going to talk a few moments until we're confident we're live, because it's our third go at it in this very moment. So hopefully we're all good, and we're checking a few things just to make sure we're all good. Marta, yeah, looking good, happy. All right, yeah. So quick introductions. My name's James. I'm a PE teacher. Teacher of sports science, teacher of online PE studies, that kind of thing. And we're going to sort of try and apply some of those things to this Mayweather-McGregor contest, which is coming up in, 8 days time. So it's pretty immediate. And just let me introduce you to the people that are with me as well. I've got Mike Pryor, who's with me over here.
Hey.
Afternoon, Michael.
All right.
Yeah, good. Looking forward to this.
Yeah, it's going to be good.
Yeah, I think it's
Quite
going to be interesting. So what we're going to try and do, Mike and I, and by the way, we've got Marta with us as well. Marta, I don't know if you just want to give us a very quick hello on your dodgy microphone.
Hello. Hello.
Martha's on the controls for us today, and she's also going to do any little searches we want, anything we want to have a look at. So the idea of today really is what we'd like to do is there's an awful lot of coverage online for the Mayweather-McGregor contest, and a lot of it is kind of sensationalist. It's hyping. It's who will win, who will lose, will it be a knockout, blah 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 blah. What we want to do is, if we're going to say someone's going to win and someone's going to lose, we'd like to sort of start to think about what are going to be the factors that lead to them being successful and not. So what we're going to do is we're going to do three live shows. One looking at the social-cultural aspects of the performances, one looking at the psychological aspects of the performances, including learning, and we're going to have one looking at the physiological aspects of the contest, including anatomy, physiology, training, exercise, all those kind of things as well. And I guess the main objective of, other than just to have a chat as an excuse instead of work, but the main objective here is that perhaps this kind of stimulus might be useful for students who are studying kind of sports science type qualifications, and it might give them a more real life applied kind of consideration to use for their studies and understand things. So on that basis, let's see if we can get started. So I've got a question for you. Having said all that we're not going to talk about who's going to win and who's going to lose, but my first question to you, Mike, is who do you think will win and why?
I think on paper you've got to give it to Mayweather, but I think McGregor could do it. You can't argue 49-0. 49 wins out of 49 fights.
Yeah,
you can't argue that.
It's hard to go logically against him.
Yeah, it is. And he's, I don't know, widely regarded as the best boxer ever.
Yeah.
I mean, that's tough. There's tough competition for that spot.
Yeah.
So that's a tough they're big boots to fill if you're gonna have that title as the world's best boxer. And then you've got Conor McGregor, who's never boxed a professional fight in his life, and people are saying that it's going to be an even fight. It's like a crazy situation. How can it be even? But I think it will be. I think it's going to be a really interesting one. There's loads that Conor brings to the table, which Floyd Mayweather is never going to have come up against before. I think on paper you've got to give it to Floyd Mayweather. As an underdog supporter, I'd like Conor McGregor to win. So yeah, it's just a very interesting fight.
But if you had to, I don't know, you had to put your home, you had to put your life on it, you'd go Mayweather, would you?
Yeah, I think so. I'd like to be brave and put it on Conor, but no, I think Floyd's going to get it.
Yeah, well, I have a similar perspective. I mean, I have two stances on this. When I think through it logically, and I try and just balance up the different strengths and weaknesses and the different experiences and previous performance accomplishments as well. When I think about all of those things, I have no choice but to think that Mayweather's going to win in this arena of boxing. In the sport of MMA, I think it would be even further the other way. I think it would be extremely... I think Conor's got a shot in this contest. I think if it was MMA, Floyd would be in big trouble.
He wouldn't stand a chance.
He would be seconds and it would be over.
Yeah, I think first round, second round.
Yeah, and so for me, but I also have this feeling, I can't really quantify it, I have this feeling that we're about to see something kind of iconic.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether that will be McGregor KOing Mayweather. I don't know whether it's going to be sort of a humiliation of Mayweather against McGregor, but I just feel we're going to see something kind of iconic. It could be a massive damn squib.
It could be.
And it might be a boring 12-round nothingness.
It literally could go either way, more than any other fight possible, because nobody knows what Conor McGregor's going to bring. We know it's going to be different. We know Mayweather's never going to have seen anything like it. It's going to be unique, so it could work out. It might not. It's going to be really interesting. And
I've got to sort of declare an interest, because I'm personally as well I'm a big fan of McGregor.
Yeah.
Partly because of his MMA career, but I became aware of him because I was doing some reading around a guy called Ido Portal, who has written numerous books and guides around movement. and I heard him talking on the London Real show on YouTube about McGregor, about his movement pattern. So I started looking at McGregor for that. And one of the things I would say about McGregor is one of the athletes that I've seen during my sort of adult years that I think he's one of the most prolific and he's one of the most impressive movers that I've ever seen. So on a physiological athletic level, I've never really seen anyone move in the way that he moves. So I'm a big fan of his for that reason. I know there's a lot of people that struggle with his kind of banter side and sort of his trash talking, and it's very brash, it's very offensive, it's very obnoxious. But I understand not everybody likes that, and a lot of people also object to the MMA concept as well. I've got mixed feelings about that. I kind of respect the technicality of it. But I am a big fan of McGregor, I have to say. I've studied him a lot in the last 18 months. So I'm a bit swayed. I'm a bit swayed in that direction. Probably my heart takes me in that direction a little bit. But I agree with you. Logically, I think probably Mayweather, but who knows? So anyway, we're going to look at this socioculturally. So let's have a chat about these guys. I mean, we've been doing a bit of reading, both of us, about. We started reading really about their backgrounds. Yeah. I mean, what did you make of that when you looked into who they are and where they come from?
So I think the important things to know: Mayweather had boxing in his family, 2 uncles, and his dad who were
very high level.
Yeah, in the boxing game. There was an interview with his dad that I saw, and his dad openly said, "I've been training him to be a boxer since the day he was born." Yeah, you know, since he was in the crib, his dad was grabbing his hands and doing some punching with him until he could do it by himself, and then he took him to the gym, and he's basically lived in the gym whilst his dad was going there every day. So he's got that real kind of we talked about it earlier, Williams sisters, Tiger Woods, early influence from family or from people around him. Yeah. McGregor, on the other hand, didn't have any of that. Nothing in the family for fighting, martial arts, boxing, anything like that. He was a very good footballer, and then he relocated town, something like that. I'm not sure why.
When you say footballer, we're talking about associate soccer footballer.
Yeah, soccer. For our international listeners.
For all them.
So he was a soccer player, striker, I think. Apparently very good, but his heart just wasn't in it. And then he moved town, found this gym, started doing some martial arts. I'm not sure what martial arts he did before. Was kickboxing?
I think he was boxing originally. He was boxing at Kremlin Boxing Club.
Yeah, and then I think he diversified, did something else, and then he found, I assume, John Kavanagh and the gym SBG. Is it
SBG? It's part of the SBGI network. Yeah. A couple of things I draw out of that I think that are really interesting. First of all, if we look at it in kind of the study perspective, we would look at the family influence, and we'd say this is a feature of what we call opportunity. If a young person is going to progress and develop from this kind of nothingness to talent into excellence, one of the things they need to have in place is familial and parental support, role modeling. And support can be both moral, it can be the fact that they encourage them. It can also be that they take them to the gym, that they give them a lift, that they do it, that they pay for
it's the practical
shorts.
Things,
It's a practical thing. So I think it's very clear that on the opportunity side, Mayweather had the best of everything in that context. With regard to boxing, I mean, he grew up in pretty urban Michigan, I think, pretty tough environment, and I think your comparison is a good one. The opportunity with regard to boxing for Conor he lived in Ireland's a big boxing nation, so he had boxing club available to him, but on the MMA side, there's literally nothing. And it's fascinating that he became, because, he didn't have that opportunity support from the family network. Cost-wise, I don't think they were wealthy, but I think they probably could.
Yeah, I think it was a very working class family.
Very working class, yeah.
They didn't have lots at their disposal, I don't think. But there seemed to be, from what I've seen, more, not more support necessarily, but more available in the area outside of boxing. It was probably a slightly more affluent area. I don't think it was an affluent area at all where he grew up, but it seems like more so than where Mayweather grew up.
Yeah, I think Mayweather had a pretty tough upbringing. We'll get back to that as well. But I want to also look at the provision aspect of this, because one of the things that I find most fascinating about this entire scenario is that SBG, Straight Blast Gym International, SBGI, at the very time when McGregor was a teenager, was boxing, coming into his adult years, trying to decide what he wanted to do, at that very moment, John Kavanagh combined with SBGI and developed the first ever mixed martial arts training centre in Dublin, not far from where McGregor lived. And you can't overlook that as a massive influence. just that provision of facility, provision of equipment, provision of coach, all of that is, I personally feel, is one of the biggest. It's no one else is talking about this, but I think this is one of the biggest influences on the fact that McGregor will stand toe to toe with the best defensive boxer in the world, and will make 100 million.
And it says a lot that he's been with the same coach ever since.
Amazing.
You know? So it says a lot about John Kavanagh and what Conor McGregor thinks of him.
Yeah.
So what's interesting though is that with boxing, MMA, mixed martial arts, whatever, the provision doesn't have to be huge.
No.
You know, we're not talking about a polo or a golf or whatever.
Yeah, you don't have to have acres of golf course, for example.
You don't need a horse.
Yeah.
So you know, you get a punch bag, you get a gym with some equipment in it, you get a good coach,
training partners, you know, and you're up.
Both of them probably had roughly equal provision. For Mayweather, the family influence was definitely more of a factor. But I think once McGregor found John Kavanagh in the gym, there was no stopping him really, and the provision was there equally for both of them probably. And
I really like the role modelling aspect of that. So John Kavanagh, for anyone who doesn't know, John Kavanagh is the head coach at SBG Dublin. He is the lead coach of Conor McGregor and numerous other athletes as well. Gunnar Nelson, there's a few others as well. There's some good up and coming athletes as well. But John Kavanagh is Ireland's first ever black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is a relatively new sport. It was developed by the Gracie family, a combination of judo and a couple of other martial arts. It's basically ground-based wrestling and fighting, looking for submissions and chokes. And the fact that McGregor happened to hook up with this Kavanagh character, it's part luck, it's part fate. I think it's a fascinating aspect of this. So just the belief that McGregor, as a young Irish kid, could potentially become a very high-level martial artist must have been massively influenced by meeting John Kavanagh and having exposure to him.
Yeah, I mean, you never know, do you? You never know if that hadn't happened. I don't know, is it the butterfly effect or whatever? What other events would have happened had that not happened?
Exactly.
If the gym was made 10 years later, Conor McGregor would have been past it and somebody else potentially would have been in that position. But do all the other factors line up at the same time like they have for McGregor? Yeah. Probably it's for 1 in a million billion. I don't know how many.
And I want to bring in. So we've kind of looked at the opportunity aspect of this. You know, that what they had as young people in terms of support, money, transport, these kind of concepts. We looked at the provision. You know, clearly Mayweather had access to a boxing club. He had access to coaching. He had access to equipment. We've just obviously covered that McGregor almost inadvertently, accidentally had the same thing. But the other aspect of being a really high-level performer is also esteem. The fact that you see yourself identified in that performance, the fact that McGregor realised that potentially he could be a very, very high-performing martial artist, and then the identity and confidence to follow that through. Now, I don't know. When you listen to McGregor, it's possible to think, well, he was kind of born that way. But there's something in him which is switched on that not everybody has. And you said something fascinating. He's never left the coaches he had as a teenager. He's taken them with him, Owen Roddy, John Kavanagh, a few others as well. And they've gone through this journey together. He's seen their strengths and weaknesses and realised they're on their journey. And I think that takes a massive amount of esteem. And it must be a source of great confidence to all of them.
Yeah, I think so. But I don't think McGregor's born with any of this.
No, I agree.
I mean, it's not the time or place to get into that nature-nurture debate because it would take forever. But
McGregor doesn't think he was born with anything.
No, and he was bullied as a child. He was very quiet, very shy, reserved. It was only when I guess there's a stereotypically Irish influence. There's fighting around, lots of people who are involved in that. But it was only when he was on the football pitch and he got annoyed and realized, and he was in a few scraps and then realized that he could handle himself, and then probably met the coaches and found the gym and things just started happening. Yeah. That gave him that confidence and made him realize that this is the direction he wanted to take. But I don't think he was born. Mayweather, on the other hand, literally his dad said he was born and I taught him to be a fighter. He was literally born into it. Yeah, he wasn't born a fighter. No, but from the day he came out, he was trained to be a fighter. Yeah, and you can see that in. I mean, he's such a specialized guy. I don't know. I mean, not that any of us I do. I suppose I don't know Floyd or Conor on a personal level, so I don't want to talk about them as people because I don't know. But clearly, there are things in Floyd's in his personality and behavioural traits which are highly impressive, his boxing, and other things which are very, very questionable. His relationship with
women is one of them. But you can see in his, he left school very early. I mean, this guy is an unbelievably skilled, high-level performer, maybe more than anyone's ever been. But he has proper deficits in other aspects. He's so specialized, but he has huge deficits in the other aspects of his life. Okay, he's compensating for them because he can. He doesn't need to worry about those other things, presumably. But I think that's an interesting, that hot housing of young people. Tiger Woods has got his own problems, of course, as almost now a post-professional icon. There's some interesting ones in there as well.
Yeah, and maybe, who knows, maybe there was 100 babies born that day who were all taught from day one to be fighters.
Yeah.
But maybe there is something innate. Maybe he is faster just genetically. He's got better reaction time. Maybe all those things, and all those things were just lined up at the right time.
It's certainly not the biggest factor, though.
Definitely not.
Because of the,
you don't have to look very far to see the attitude and the mindset of both of these guys. It's like far exceeds even most top athletes.
Yeah.
Conor McGregor basically just constantly thinks about fighting, constantly going through his head.
Yeah.
But and the mental rehearsal influence is going to be huge because he's constantly mentally rehearsing these things over and over and over again. Mayweather was the same.
Yeah.
Mayweather was famous for just running. Whenever he felt like going for a run, he'd go for a run. Whatever he was wearing, he would just get up and run. And there was videos of his mates saying they just left a club or they're just out with friends, and he would just roll up his jeans and stick some shoes on and just go for a run. He'd be like, it's 3 a.m. He would phone his coach, come on, get in the gym. We're late. We need to train.
Yeah.
That's a serious commitment. So I think that definitely has a bigger impact than whether you're born with some innate boxing talent.
Yeah. What I'm interested in as well is that to even be able to have that obsession, to behave that way, you've got to have a series of experiences behind you which make you feel like that is even worthwhile. Otherwise, you're just a crazy person. In his context, getting out and running at 3 a.m. kind of makes sense because he's preparing for these athletic contests. Otherwise, it's just wildness, So all of those circumstances of young people developing into the sport, I think, allow those behaviours to be relevant in this context. I want to touch on something else on the sociocultural side as well, and it's kind of hard to avoid here, but it's the commercialisation of this event. I mean, what do you make of it?
Well, what are we set to make on this? Not us, but what's set to $650 million?
$1 billion, I believe, is going to be $1
billion.
The turnover is going to be in the region of the figures I've seen are well over $1 billion, possibly two.
Yeah,
$2 billion.
This is crazy money.
It's an entire industry around 36 minutes.
Yeah,
it's quite remarkable, really.
Yeah.
And the figures I've seen in terms of the monies earned by the fighters is that McGregor is reported to be they're expecting him to clear in the region of 140 million, and it's anticipated that he needs to give he needs to give 40 million of that to the UFC as the people that have allowed him within his contract to compete here. And the figures I've seen that Mayweather is comfortably in the realms of 180 to 220 million, possibly more.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money. And I think what's interesting for us to potentially explore is, where does that money come from? I mean, how do you interpret that? I mean, it's got to have been somewhere. How does it get to be there?
Well, UFC has overtaken boxing as the biggest pay-per-view sport, I think.
Yeah. They don't hold the records. I think boxing still holds the top records, but all of the recent highest gates.
So more, and that's what's interesting about this fight. That's why it's so much, is because you're bringing the two biggest industries of pay-per-view together.
Yeah.
So you're not just relying on boxing or the UFC.
Are there any other big pay-per-view? And does music have big pay-per-view events? Do they? I don't think they do. Do they?
Not in the same way. I don't think people tune in and watch Coldplay on their telly and pay for it. They pay for the ticket, but
it's pay-per-view in the sense that you go there,
you go to a gig
instead of them. That's why they tour, right? Because otherwise, the music model for this would be they do it over and over again in more places.
Yeah.
Which who knows, that still might happen. But the pay-per-view thing is fascinating. So if we look at pay-per-view as a form of media, of course, traditionally the way this would have worked is that this would have been aired on, say, let's go back to the 80s and 90s. It would have been aired on terrestrial TV. And the terrestrial TV channel, ITV or whatever, would have had to pay for the rights to show that, and then they'd have earned it back through advertising. But that model has dramatically changed in the last 20 years. Yeah. So we have a model here where Showtime, HBO, I think, are involved, and BT Sport have the rights to.
Not Sky? Not
I don't think Sky.
Oh, really? I thought it was on Sky Box Office.
Oh, is it Sky Box Office? Is it? I might be wrong.
I think one.
Yeah.
I don't. I'm
Is it
not sure they
BT
both got it. I think one of them has the rights.
You might be right, actually. It might be Sky. Okay, so
Box Office.
we got a British-based.
But you can imagine. You can imagine then, in terms of how this cost has risen so much.
Yeah.
You've got Sky and BT fighting for the exclusive rights to it.
Yeah.
You can just imagine that's constantly gone up and up and up, and then Sky or whoever's got it has eventually won.
Yeah.
Based on the fact they can afford more money, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah. And it's interesting from the media channel's perspective because, of course, they're selling the pay-per-views. A big share of that pay-per-view goes to the promoters, goes to the fighters, it goes to costs, obviously, to put it on. But, of course, the media company makes part of that pay-per-view as well. But the other thing the media company can do is that they have certain rights to sell advertising and sponsorship within that pay-per-view environment, periods of adverts, having links to certain visual commercial products as well. So that the media company is also swirling money. So whether it's Showtime or Sky Sports, there's a reason they're doing this. They're not just doing this to put this on. They're doing this because at the end of the day, they're going to make profit. Equally, the sponsors, those sponsors, are going to have their brands heavily associated with this visible, spectacular, probably memorable event. And these sponsors are swirling this money. So I come back to the same question. Where does this money come from? And of course, the answer to that is that wherever you look, the media company, the sponsors, the fighters, the promoters, that money ultimately comes from us.
Comes from the spectators.
The consumer.
Yeah.
So if we buy the pay-per-view, if we get involved in the embedded coverage on YouTube or the show, the all access they put on Showtime, these things are swirling and generating income. There's going to be the merchandising aspect, and all of these things combined means that people like me, people like you, people like various other individuals who might be interested are going to pay in the region of 1 billion to 2 billion to access this sporting entertainment concept. And I think that's an absolutely fascinating thing.
So £20, I think, in the UK, $80 in the US.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Oh, that's really good because I'm going to buy it. I thought it was £100.
I think. Like when I was reading yesterday, £20 in the UK, and $80 in the US.
$80 in the US for the pay-per-view.
Yeah.
Wow.
And you've got however many hundreds of thousands of boxing fans and UFC fans.
Yeah.
Hundreds of thousands is a very low estimate. You've got millions across the world who are going to pay to watch.
Well, this is the thing. The record, as I understand it, for pay-per-view was the Mayweather-Pacquiao contest.
Yeah.
And that one was, I think, 4.6 million pay-per-view buys. Now, the argument here that I originally heard, I know there's some concerns about it at the moment, but they reckon this pay-per-view is going to clear something in the region of 5 million pay-per-view buys. So let's take that figure of $80. I mean, you've got to multiply that by 5 million. You're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars being earned simply for the pay-per-view access. So this traditional idea in this kind of pugilistic historical sense where two patronize, we'll come back to that point in a minute, but two fighters with their wealthy patrons would come together on some field, they'd form a ring, they'd fight it out, and people would come to watch it. I mean, how that has changed until today.
And I guess it's the technology and the communication that's led to it. But you can see why there's such a big build up to this thing. Yeah. Or if they're talking about making however many millions, billions of dollars, they want as many people interested. They want this in the media as much as possible. Yeah. They've done the tour of 5 places or something.
Four places.
Yeah.
2 US, 1 Canada, 1 UK.
Yeah. Of promotion and they're going at each other. They're slandering each other. Mm. Now, how much of that is? None of that's scripted, but how much of that
literally
is
slandering each other?
Literally.
I mean, yeah, it's
how much of there's definitely an element of neither of them mind what the other person is saying. Well, generally because they're selling a fight.
Exactly. I mean, I would imagine that Mayweather was pretty happy that he. I mean, I think one of the reasons Mayweather came back for this. We'll talk about this in a second, his motivations, but I think one of the reasons he came back for this is because McGregor has the capacity to earn him all this money because he is so visible, he is so vocal, he is such a good talker, he's a damn intelligent man, despite perhaps his initial impression he makes.
And Mayweather himself, he's not exactly shy in front of the camera.
No,
they're both the best in the game at talking on the camera and building a buzz around a fight.
So what do you make of the role of? I mean, if we look, so we've got $1 billion to a $2 billion sporting contest. We've got slander being thrown left and right. They've insulting each other deeply in terms of how they talk to each other. I mean, what does this represent within our culture? What does this represent within our society? Why do we have these pinnacles of kind of athletic and entertainment. What does this mean for us? Why is this part? Why are we not watching dancing, for example? Why is it? What is it?
I don't know. There's something deeply entrenched, isn't there, about people fighting or anything fighting. It's like it's the most boiled down competitive event there is. Just one versus one.
I've never done it. I am not the tough guy here. You've been in combat contests.
Yeah, I'll never say it's as high level as this, but yeah. So karate was my sport. I've done a fair few competitions, just lots of training, lots of sparring, grappling, all those kinds of things. And karate is if you took a mixed martial artist, then karate would be one of their things. But we would argue in karate that karate basically is mixed martial arts. There's elements of jiu-jitsu, of judo, of aikido, all these taekwondo, kickboxing. Nothing is off limits just because you're in a sport. So I can kind of appreciate when you watch a video of McGregor training and he's going 9 rounds and so he's going 9 and then he's got a different opponent every round. This is one of his famous training things, and the person gets heavier and heavier each time. So by the time he's in the 9th round, he's exhausted and he's got a big guy who's going to come and fight him. But I don't think people appreciate quite how energy sapping it is to be grappling with somebody, especially somebody heavier. Yeah, it's such a physical challenge.
Yeah, I think that's one of the perhaps at the moment ill-considered aspects of it. We'll come back to this on the physiological session, but I think you're right. I think a lot of people expect McGregor to tire in this fight. I think they call it gassing is the term they would use, but that, of course, is based on some of the experiences we've seen with McGregor through his contest with people like Nate Diaz, for example, where there's a lot of grappling involved. Okay, it actually didn't last very long in that contest, but I think it's highly unlikely here because of that energy sapping nature of those things not being present. He's ultimately going to be on his feet, moving, striking. Yeah. I think what makes it more interesting is how many times will he be struck, and will he be able to keep his coherent, fast, mobile, agile movement? I think assuming he's not struck too many times, he will last the fight, no problem at all.
And you've got 2 guys there who are both very defensive, who both are known for not being hit very hard or very many times. Yeah. So it's going to be really interesting how that pans out. Who's going to make the first move? Yeah.
It's going to be it's a fascinating. I want to come back to that point, like the role of this in society. I think about this quite a lot. I think it's very telling that in our society, and not only in ours, but in many as well. I mean, we could look at sumo in Japan. We could look at wrestling in Mongolia. I mean, there's lots of cultures, as you say, where the physical combat contest is the most pinnacleized, that's probably not a word, elevated concept of sport. Because I think you're right, it boils it down as well. But there's something else mixed in here as well. The fact that people are so willing to spend time, money, stay up during the night to watch this. There's something about competition. There's something about professionalism. There's something about the spectacle of this, which is wrapping a lot of people into the
theatre as well.
There's a lot of theatre to it. I think it's very gladiatorial. You know, how was it? I mean, Marty, you might know this better than me. How was it? How did they refer to it in Roman times? Was it pan akakinses? Isn't that what they referred to it? Bread and circuses. How do you keep the people entertained? How do you keep them happy? You provide them bread in the sense that you provide them just enough to get by, and entertainment. You provide the spectacle, the theatre. Now, I don't exactly know how gladiatorial battles happen apart from that film, what I saw. But, you know, there's blood, gore, nastiness, and people, of course, were entertained and intrigued by that. So that, to me, is a big part of what this is. It's the appeasement point. We can dissolve ourselves into watching all this build-up on YouTube. We can watch the fight on the 26th. We can talk about it afterwards. And for those periods of time, we kind of escape the grey sludge, which is often our lives. Yeah. And, all poetic. Yeah. but I think there's a great deal of sport in general fulfilling that role within our society.
Yeah, typically football is
that
in
our
role,
country.
Isn't it? In soccer is that role, you know, that kind of escaping the everyday life. We look forward to the weekend, that kind of stuff. The other thing that's really interesting is that form of entertainment, fighting as a form of entertainment, is one of the earliest. Yeah. When you go back to popular recreation, way back 1800 and whatever, that's one of the earliest. And then supposedly we've evolved since then in terms of what we like, in terms of rational recreation, in terms of how sports developed and been codified. Yeah. And yet here we are, 2017. still getting excited about two guys going at each other in a ring.
It's a fascinating thing. I'm glad you brought that
There's
up.
Something deep about that.
There's definitely something. Look, I heard someone describe this. I want to get back to that historical point in a second, actually. But there's something interesting. I've heard Dana White say this before. Why is MMA popular? And he gives an analogy. He says, right, if you're standing on a street corner, I imagine some street corner in an urban American city because he's an American guy. And if you're standing on a street corner or some kind of road interchange, and he said if there's a basketball match on one corner, you might stop and watch that basketball match. But if a fight breaks out on the other corner, your attention is going to what is happening over there. Now, if it's a boxing match is going to catch your attention and you're going to be sort of zoned in on that thing. If it's an MMA or full combat type experience, you're even going to turn away from that one and look at this one. And I think you're right. There's something of the spectacle. Whether you respect that spectacle or not is an individual decision. I actually respect the technicality of these performers. I don't like the violence of it. I don't enjoy people being hurt, but I do enjoy the performance aspect of it. But yeah, I agree. There's something deep in our psyche around that. But I want to come back to that point about the sports history. You're right. How did we get from this notion of middle-class respectability, of amateurism, of gentlemen amateurs, and get to this highly professionalized, highly commercialized? We're doing it for the money, I think it's pretty fair to argue. And it's going to be this huge global spectacle rather than this local event that perhaps was more typical in history. I mean, the transition between those two things in 150 years, I think, is absolutely spectacular. But maybe one of the answers to that, when we talk about all middle-class people in rational recreation, mid-9th century, they all behaved in this amateurish way. Did they?
Yeah.
What about this shamatha concept? What about the fact that wealthy men typically would behave as a patron and would have a foot racer or would have a pugilist, a boxer, for example, and they put them up for contests against those of other wealthy people? That really hasn't changed that much.
No.
The gambling, the wagering, all that was rife at that point. So aspects of it, the colour of it has changed, the tone of it has changed, but maybe the deep mindset is not that different.
Yeah, and you have to. It's too simplistic to say that from, I don't know, mid 1700s to mid 1800s, everyone was feral. Everyone was taking part in ridiculous sports where they're just going and hurting each other and playing mob football in their town. And then all of a sudden it switched and you had football or you had boxing or with rules. You know, there was a gradual process, and inevitably there's still underground things going on when in this kind of period of rational recreation where things are supposed to be becoming more respectable, more gentlemanly, whatever. There's still people boxing and betting and wagering.
That's right.
You know, so it's not quite as clean cut as people think. And now we're in a situation where people are looking at that and going, well, why isn't that a valid sport like football, like rugby? But it is. Clearly people are paying to watch it. They want to see it. It's entertaining. It's bringing in more money than most of those other sports combined. You know, it's why are we drawing the line and saying that? Well, why do some people draw the line and say that MMA, boxing, any of these sports are somehow taboo or shouldn't be taken part?
I guess the playing devil's advocate there, some would argue it's violent and I don't like violence. I mean, how do you see that?
Well, this is completely anecdotal, doesn't argue the point at all. I did karate, I did judo from when I was about 8 or 9, I guess, and then did karate ever since. And I've never been seriously injured at all. I played one rugby match and broke my leg. So there's a perceived violence to it, but those two people are entering the ring voluntarily, fully consenting to go and take part in this sport. And when you speak to lots of them, they're not that interested in going and beating up the other person.
It's quite rare.
You don't get that real sadistic kind of. No. I just want to.
It's
go
very
and
frowned
hurt
upon,
somebody.
actually.
It's really not. And in the training to that, I mean, people see the event, but they don't see the training. You can't train like that, really. You have to go. People have to go to work. They have to get on and train the next day, and they have to survive. And you can't go hammer and tong all the time. So there is especially I think in MMA, and definitely in boxing. I don't know that so much, but there's very much a respectability thing. It's very disciplined. Your martial arts very much pride themselves on that. So it's far from that real violent, aggressive spectacle that people think it is.
Yeah.
And beneath that, there's a much more respectable kind of thing.
It's interesting to look at the development of what I originally thought was cage fighting into now what I really respect as MMA. Because when I first saw it was probably 15, 20 years ago, and I literally thought people were locked in a cage killing each other, literally gladiatorial.
People chucking the chairs in.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's that side. There's those sports as well. But yeah, I mean, perhaps the initial image we were all marketed with regard to cage fighting was around violence. It was the fact that they're in a cage. But this notion of MMA is very, very separated from that concept. It's highly technical. It's highly professional. It's highly controlled. It's highly regulated. So I don't think that argument stands up as much as some people initially think it does. When I first started watching McGregor, I had to really desensitize gradually to the strikes, to the kicks, to the blows to the head, this kind of thing. Now those things don't bother me so much. I actually get more affected by the kind of rear naked chokes and that kind of thing. Like that to me is much starker an example of being in distress. But I think that shows as well what a brilliant job the UFC has done, and other companies like Bellator and Cage War, a few others as well, and what a brilliant job they've done in mainstreaming the sport of UFC, because that definitely is one of the reasons why McGregor is even considered for a contest like this. So a couple of things I draw out about the UFC. I think it's been very, very well managed by, I think it's the Fertitta brothers and Dana White. Dana White's still involved. I think as well they've done certain things which I really have a lot of respect for. I want to touch on a gender point. We've talked about it on a number of occasions. The UFC, unlike almost all other westernized sports, puts men and women at the same level within their sport. And I think that is something to really behold in the modern world, because as much as, yes, women's soccer is available, women's rugby, I watched a bit on the TV last night, the World Cup's at the moment, these sports are available. They're nowhere near seen with the same level of recognition, acceptance and value as, for example, Rousey, Holly Holm, Miesha Tate, Chris Cyborg, Jermaine Durandamy. These kind of competitors are seen on the same level, even to the point where they will they will be the top of the card in many of the evenings that they put on. And also when they put like their pound for pound lists out, men and women are in there together.
Yeah.
So I think the UFC have done a brilliant job on that side. I've got a lot of respect for them and how they've done that. And I think that the UFC model with regard to gender could be a real major influencer on other sports, on other more traditional sports.
It's great, and I think that's been born out of a commercial aspect in part.
Partly,
I'd like to think that it's just because of gender equality, and they see them as equal, and it's just as entertaining to whoever you're watching. And there's definitely an element of that, but there's also this thing that the UFC mixed martial arts is old, but UFC is relatively new when you compare that to other governing bodies, if you can call UFC a governing body. But they've had this thing where they can go, well, we want to make as much money as possible out of this sport, basically. So we've got men's. But why would we not promote men and women equally?
It's amazing.
I mean, there's definitely not as many female fighters.
No, there's
so. And when you look at a card,
there's not the same pool of fighters.
So that's why people go, oh yeah, but it's not equal because there's always more men on the card than women. It's like, okay, but that's just a product of the fact there's less female
just
fighters.
Numerical, yeah.
But why would they promote men over women or vice versa? Just promote them both because they get more views on pay-per-view.
Yeah.
And it baffles me really. Surely the historical context of all the other sports can't be so strong that they choose not to get the commercial benefit from promoting women's soccer and men's soccer. I don't understand it. Why is it not equal?
Do you know what? I think it's sometimes seen in the sense that let's just I don't want to speak negatively of anyone I don't know. So let's just take Sky Sports. Say they show an awful lot of football, an awful lot of men's professional football. Thousands and thousands of hours over the course of a season, and they show a small amount of women's professional football as well, although not a great deal at all. Now, I think part of it is almost like an assumption that if we show more women's football, we have to show less men's football. I don't know whether that is true or not, whether people only have a certain capacity for football, and it's so saturated with men's football that if you push back in the other way, you lose some of that saturation of the men's football, and commercially that's not viable. So what you see a lot of the time is, for example, the Women's Super League takes place, or at least part of it takes place over the summer when the men are tired and having a rest. It's almost literally this. I've often said this with regard to cheerleading. Just to be clear, I have no problem with the athletic brilliance of cheerleaders. Magnificent, impressive. If you do it, massive respect to you. But the way it's placed into sporting context is interesting. It's almost like the big, muscular men are tired from smashing into each other. Now we're going to get the women on, traditionally, not so much these days, to dance around and flaunt their tits a bit. Yeah. Now, okay, however athletic it is, if you marginalise it in that way, that is not balanced. And I think women's, say, football has been treated that way. It kind of fits into the gaps of when the men's football is not on. It's almost like that. You've ever seen like veterans men's football? They do the same with that. Right, there's no football, there's no men's football, and let's put the veterans and the women on.
We've got some time to kill.
Yeah, it's literally like that, isn't it? And I think there's an assumption like that, but for me, whether traditional sports can do that rapidly, I don't know. Boxing is definitely following. If you look at the developing careers of people like Nicola Adams, for example, boxing is definitely following the UFC model of having big contests with women headlining those contests, both in the UK and in Europe and in the USA as well. So it's encouraging to see that that's happening. But the UFC for me is number one. I think they've done a magnificent. They've done a magnificent job. I want to touch on one more thing about gender here before we move on to something else. But the other thing that's interesting here is that these two men are men.
Yeah.
We are not talking about two women having this $2 billion contest in boxing. We're talking about men. Now, you could just say, well, they happen to be men. But we have to, again, start to look at the traditional identity of what it means to be sporting. Look at the traditional notions of what it is to be athletic. Look at who developed rational sport and the fact they happen to be male. So therefore sport tends to reflect kind of male body type, shape, force, power, strength. So it's not a surprise that this huge boxing spectacle involves two men. And I'm not speaking negatively of Mayweather and McGregor. I respect them both massively as individuals. But I find it very interesting.
There's no argument. That's definitely a product of the history.
Yeah.
As opposed to just a coincidence. Oh, it could have just as easily been two women. I don't think so.
Here's a question for you: If we were just all of a sudden, if we were to click our fingers and change the rules, structures, and the notion of boxing, so rather than it being based on agility, reaction, strength, power, that the primary components of fitness were pain tolerance, hyper flexibility, and hyper endurance, who would be the contestants that then on the 26th? I would argue it would be more likely that they would be women.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying you can. Boxing would clearly be a different thing.
Yeah.
But if those were the things exploited by the sport,
I think those characteristics are probably more likely to be found in kickboxing.
Yes.
The flexibility element.
Yeah.
And you'd probably find, I don't know, but you'd probably find a higher percentage of women do kickboxing than boxing.
Yeah. And I want to highlight something else as well, and it's on the kickboxing point, on the gender front as well, because if McGregor wins, or even if he gets close, we're all going to talk about this amazing crossover experience, and he's the first one to do it, etc., etc., etc. No, he's not.
Yeah.
No, he's not. Holly Holm is a 17-time Muay Thai boxing and also happens to be MMA champion, world champion. So she has been a world champion at all three of those sports, but almost like it doesn't count. She's done very well out of her sport, but it's almost like it doesn't count. This would be the first time. No, she's before. And it reminds me of that question that Andy Murray was asked at Wimbledon, where I think he was asked something along the lines of, how do you feel about the Americans getting into the semi-finals for the first time in so many years? And he said, what about Serena?
Yeah.
She's there every year.
Yeah.
So it's almost like sometimes the gender...
Oh, forgot about the girls.
The girls, forgot about them.
Yeah. Yeah, they do count, I suppose.
Yeah, so if anyone does know who Holly Holm is, I think she's a very interesting person to talk about here. So she's very well known for the person who head kicked and knocked out Ronda Rousey. But more importantly, she's a many time Muay Thai boxing, and she was also the bantamweight women's UFC champion until she lost to Miesha Tate. Yeah. So to me, she has already achieved many of the things that we're potentially talking about McGregor here. National governing body. Let's have a little chat about this. We've got this in the last couple of days. We've had the Nevada State Athletic Commission has allowed the change of gloves down to 8-ounce gloves. I mean, first of all, let's recognise that the Nevada State Athletics Commission, which I have to get used to saying NSAC, they are effectively the governing body for this event. They are sanctioning it. They're providing the referee. They're providing the judges. They're providing, I believe, the medical support. I believe they're also providing the doping controls as well. They're absolutely pivotal for this. I mean, some people have argued that they shouldn't have granted McGregor a boxing license, which I think is an interesting one.
Yeah.
But how do you see the role of the governing body in this sort of event?
Well, somebody's got to take charge of all those things.
Yep.
And I suppose you need, in this case, you need somebody who is impartial.
Yeah.
So I don't know much about them, but I assume they're not boxing or MMA related necessarily. So somebody impartial. It's interesting to see what they do with the judges.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you can have a boxing judging panel. You got to have a mix of boxing and MMA experts on the panel, I suppose.
Well, people have got a foot in both camps, at least some. It would be very hard to be objective as a judge if you've always been a boxing judge.
Yeah, I think so. Because you're going to look at McGregor and think, what is this guy doing? He's not boxing. There's going to be definitely parts of the fight where you go, this isn't boxing. This is a weird kind of mix of boxing and karate and whatever else. So if you're a boxing judge and that's all you know, there's definitely going to be a bias there towards the person who looks more like a boxer.
Yeah.
The other thing is, if it goes 12 rounds and it has to go to a judge decision, I don't know which judges are going to choose McGregor over.
It would be a big moment for boxing if McGregor won by decision.
Yeah, massive.
Oh.
And I'm not sure there's boxing judges, but I'm not sure there's many people who would be brave enough to go, actually, I'm going to give it to McGregor.
Okay, it seemed to be. I think we're back on.
Still on?
Did we press something? Did we press something by accident? Not sure what happened there. But if you experienced a little bit of downtime there, so did we. So yeah, I think we've got a low video output. Let's stick with it and see how we go. We should hopefully be all right. Where were we? Yeah,
NGBs. Yeah. So so I think the judging panel is going to be interesting to see who's on that.
Yeah.
Commentators are easier, I suppose. I'm hoping they're going to have a good mix of commentators in the fight. And then I suppose the other I don't know really. There's somebody's got to take on those jobs, and they're going to do those jobs on an organizational basis. The UFC have a part to play. Obviously, in the build-up, they're going to have a bigger part to play. Mm-hmm. On the night, they're not going to have a massive amount. It's all going to be done for this. They're just going to be there enjoying the fight, I suppose. All the people involved in the UFC, Dana White, etc. On the boxing side, who's the governing body for?
So
I assume it'd be an American.
Yeah, I mean, in the US, I mean, I'm not sure what their boxing national governing body is concerned, but I think it's state to state. So I think it would literally be the Nevada State Athletics Commission.
Okay, so I think they govern.
Yeah, I think so.
They know that they would have had lots of discussions about how this is going to work, and both sides would be happy with what's been decided. So I don't think there's any.
There's a lot of lawyers involved.
Yeah.
All right, so we think we're back on. We've got a bit of we just had a little bit of a cut in our internet here. We just had a big storm around us. We're not sure if it's related to that or not, or it might simply be that a cable came out. But no, we've got a big storm outside. So anyway, we're gonna carry on. So apologies if you had a little interruption there, but we're gonna continue. Look, I want to raise some there. I want to be, before I say this, as far as we are concerned, McGregor and Mayweather are utterly clean in their preparations, and there's zero doping involved in this whatsoever, as far as we're concerned.
We have to assume that.
Yeah, absolutely. But what I do think is interesting to talk about within this is the protocols they're going to follow in terms of the doping control. So obviously it would be extremely serious if one of these guys was taking stanozolol or some other anabolic or some form of testosterone, and they were effectively able to strike with more power and to do more damage to their opponents. So it's absolutely essential that the doping control is done in a really rigorous way. So my understanding of the way that's going to work is that they're effectively following the rules of WADA, the World Anti-Doping Agency, and that's going to be applied by USADA, the US, United States Anti-Doping Agency. And there are a number of facets to this, and I'm going to come back to some doping aspects for the UFC as well, because they had a problem a few years back. But what's perhaps interesting here is that these athletes, they're going to go through effectively out-of-competition testing throughout their training period. They're going to go through pre-competition testing, so before the fight, initially they're going to take testing there, and they're going to have post-competition testing as well. I believe it's all urine based. I don't believe they're taking blood samples. I haven't read that they are.
Okay.
I know when Mayweather fought Pacquiao, that was kind of a big issue because he wanted blood samples to be taken as well. But there's obviously a desire here, as WADA's rules stipulate, that the A's and the B samples are taken not only in the competition period, but in the training period. And of course, from that doping perspective, a lot of the potential damage can be done if an athlete develops such things like more power, more strength through use of steroids, for example, through that training period. So they've clearly put a protocol in place which presumably ensures that any temptation would never come to anything, because these athletes are both going to turn up clean. Yeah. So I think it's an absolutely essential part of this performance to have that level playing field.
I think people, when we think about drugs, especially if people are watching this at doing A-level, GCSE, whatever, people assume that you take a performance-enhancing drug, that automatically makes you some sort of superhuman, and you can run faster and punch faster.
There are some that do that.
But most of the time, people are taking these in the training phase, in the lead up to the event, in order to be able to train harder, faster, or more frequently, so that when they get to the event, they potentially could be clean, but they've been allowed to train harder, faster. They've trained at superhuman level, so that they are naturally more superhuman when they get to the event.
It's clearly the case that athletes call it glowing, or doped athletes call it glowing. If an athlete has taken some kind of illegal performance enhancing drug, it has a period of time, depending on what they've taken, how much they've taken. It has a period of time where they glow on the test. In other words, they're gonna test positive if they were to be tested there and then. So of course, a lot of athletes in the last sort of 25, 30 years have become really proficient at managing their doping schedule. So whenever the tester comes, they either avoid the test or they're able to be confident they're not going to test positive. The Lance Armstrong, Tyler Hamilton, Floyd Landis, Judge Hancapi, those guys perhaps perfected it the best that we're aware of. But that's one of the methodologies. If we look at some of the products that would potentially support these athletes, some of them are illegal and some of them are legal. I'm going to make an assumption. I don't know that both of these athletes, for example, are using creatine at the moment. I don't know that they are, but it would certainly potentially be very helpful for them. Creatine is a product completely legal in sport, which allows the most anaerobic high intensity energy system to perform for longer. So you can throw a barrage of punches or move quickly, and you're less likely to fatigue from that very high intensity. Now we can ask a question, which is, why is that drug on that side of the line and not on this side of the line? Whereas if they take what did I mention earlier, stanozolol, which is a drug that have been used heavily in East Germany and Russia, for example, until recently apparently. But that drug is
steroid,
an anabolic steroid, and it is on the other side of the line. So again, one of the interesting things about the doping conversation is you've got the protocols, you've got the testing, you've got the implications, the reasons to, the reasons not to, but you've also got the conversation of where is the line drawn. And I think that's
the job of WADA.
That's the job of WADA,
the national anti-doping agencies.
And we're not criticising here. We're not saying they've got it wrong. I don't consider that they have, but I think it's fascinating to think that line changes. So in one, say, Olympic cycle or this year, one drug will be illegal when next year it will be legal.
And from sport to sport. When you look at things like beta blockers, that's going to be illegal in certain sports now.
Yeah. And WADA, of course, they also don't necessarily prevent certain recreational drugs. So testing for alcohol, tobacco, marijuana, cocaine, for example, these things would not be considered performance enhancing, but of course can be very damaging for the reputation and the image of sport as well. So there's numerous things that are not considered on the performance enhancing illegal side, which still are definitely influencing the performance of the athletes. Creatine is a good example of one. Caffeine could be another one. They're probably both using caffeine to some degree. Caffeine has a couple of impacts. Caffeine as a stimulant, it makes the fighter more alert. Secondly, it helps with the dissolving of lipids and triglycerides in the blood, so that for the later rounds, fat can be transported to the muscle and can be burned through beta oxidation. We're going into physiology here, but the point is
they can go for longer.
And they can also, it will also help them in the recovery between rounds as well. Very efficient aerobic oxidation. So it will help in the recovery as well. So those processes, they are deemed to be completely legal, but have a performance enhancing aspect. I'm sure nutritionally they're going to be using lots of supplements as well. Lots of protein will be taken. There'll be all kinds of stuff. But
and they'll be very aware of the things they can take, things they can't take, and in what quantities. But there's going to be things like, if I take this much of it,
correct,
it's not going to show up, and I'll be fine, even if it's illegal.
Yeah. Now again, we want to be clear. We are not alleging for 1 second that McGregor and all his lawyers.
That's not just, and not in this sport, just in sport in general.
Yeah.
That there's a threshold.
Yeah,
for
that's
most
right.
of these things. So, but that's not to say that they are taking it on or not. But they'll be very, very acutely aware of what they can and can't have, and I think that's part of their job as an athlete at that level. Not just these two, any sportsman. Who was it a little while ago? Who's tennis? I think somebody in tennis said, "Oh, it was in the massage oil." Who was that?
Who was it? It wasn't Rosetsky, was it?
No, I don't.
Was Sharapova? What did she do?
I'm not sure. One of those tennis players, and I think it was in Wimbledon this year. There was something in the oils that and I think, well, if you're going and being massaged by somebody who you don't know, and you don't know what they're using, and you're performing at that top level in a few weeks' time in Wimbledon, that's your own fault. You should be more aware.
I agree. There's the Alberto Contador case where he claims that he got I can't remember the drug now, Sabutamol, I think it's called, and he got that from meat. Okay, it could be that they tested a lot of Spanish beef, and they found 1 in 10,000 cows did have it. So theoretically, it's possible. But I agree with you. It's ultimately the responsibility of that individual. I also want to touch on some other things here as well. We mentioned earlier kind of the notion of professionalism around the sport, and we distinguished that from the historical development. I want to talk about that notion of amateurism and what sport as a construct kind of previously was. So I can only speak in British context. So in British society, sport traditionally was seen by a certain group of people, not all, certainly middle class, emerged from the Industrial Revolution, made a lot of money, were trying to implement their own styles, their own identities, and they saw the value of sport being completely amateur in the image of God, as you said before, rational, for a purpose, for intrinsic values. Now, that amateur approach has been very common within sport, even sort of going into the modern era, where people will still kind of rely on things like talent. And what I think is kind of fascinating about this event is that you can almost see zero evidence of amateurism left in the sporting context. That traditional notion of amateurism is literally lost. It's gone. Now, I'm not saying that's good or bad for other people to decide, for everyone to decide on their own level, but we literally have lost that notion of amateurism in this sporting side. This is an utterly professional, scientific, even the doping and all that kind of stuff, can making sure that you're not gonna get picked up for taking something accidental. World-class facilities, world-class biomechanics, world-class psychology, world-class physiotherapy, world-class massage to produce this athletic spectacle at the end. And I think that's a subtle but fascinating aspect of this.
And that kind of goes back to the Golden Triangle, I suppose.
Yeah.
The sponsorship, media, and elite sport thing. Nobody's paying for all of those things you just listed: the massage, the drug testing, the world-class arenas, for somebody who goes, "Oh, well, it's okay if I win, if I don't win." For somebody who's got that attitude of, "Oh, I'm just here to have a nice time, and it's just in the image of God," and you don't deserve the right to be on that world stage with all that being spent on you if you're not going to perform to the absolute best that you possibly can.
Yeah.
And put on a show for everybody who's paying the money in the first place to watch you perform at the best. So I think it's representative of society, really, in so much that it effectively is commercialism which drives up the competition. It's almost like a very nice left-wing idea that sport would just be for everybody and everyone would just enjoy it, and if you win or lose, it kind of wouldn't really matter. But there's money involved, people are paying for it, there's competition involved, there's status. It's just the output of competition, right?
Yeah. I mean, those guys in the 19th century, they wouldn't have seen it as left wing, or
No, of course.
they didn't even see their sport as
It's a bit
being
of a tenuous link, to be fair.
Yeah, no, but interesting. They would have not seen the sport as they played it for everybody. They didn't want those working class people taking part. Or if they did, they were in very specific roles, very specific processes. They wanted to be separate. They literally excluded them in various examples. You know, there's examples in sports like rowing, athletics, where they literally excluded people that worked with their hands to be able to take part in their competitions. The first Olympic Games, there was not a very representative, diverse experience of athletes in 1896 in Greece, for example. They were a very, very narrow identity of middle class white. I think there were also Japanese athletes involved, and all male. So
there was only 4 or 5 nations. Right?
I think it's about 7 or 8, 6 or 7. Yeah, but it was very, very narrow. This notion of the whole world is a more recent thing for the Olympics. And and actually, I'm jumping around here, but I want to come back to something else as well. I want to come back to the weight cutting aspect of this. I mean, what do you make of that? I mean, MMA is notorious for athletes cutting a lot of weight to make those weight divisions. Boxing, I think, similarly. I mean, they're fighting 154 pounds on Saturday, which seems to be more in the comfort zone of McGregor and a little bit heavier for Mayweather. How do you see that?
Well, it's tough, isn't it? It's tough on the athletes. I think it's a necessary evil, really. I don't think anybody would say that they necessarily enjoy doing that. But yeah, they look forward to that. But people are going to do it because they're going to get an advantage at the end of the day if they can just all of a sudden lose a little bit of weight. If they can cut down to a certain weight and then just dehydrate massively just before the weigh-in, and then just put that water back on. I was listening to somebody, I think it was even this morning, who said that the body becomes more resistant to that over time.
Yeah.
So when you do that, the next time you do it, it's a little bit harder for your body to cut.
It doesn't want to go.
Doesn't keep going over a long period of time. So if you're looking at, no doubt both of these guys are going to make the weight, but Mayweather's done that a lot more than McGregor. I don't know if that has any impact whatsoever, but he's had.
Is that perhaps why he's going up rather than down?
Maybe, I wonder if it's easier for him to go up than to cut.
I mean, I don't have the impression that Mayweather has massive changes in weight. I mean, he probably walks around slightly, maybe 3-4 kilos heavier than he would do it in his contest. But yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe when you're older, it's much harder to do weight cuts. So they've gone at that way. There seem to be a couple of reasons to go that way. One might have been that. The other one was the gloves, which they've gone back on. They've gone down to lighter gloves, which I find I was amazed that the Nevada State Athletic Commission agreed to that.
Yeah,
I don't see any reason for it.
No.
I'm not saying I don't want it to happen. I was sort of pleased because I kind of want McGregor to win. So I was kind of pleased it did happen.
Definitely good for him.
I think it's good for him. But I have no idea why the governing body decided that was okay. Why is it in the interest of the fighters? I don't understand that.
No. I don't think it is.
Yeah.
I think it's more of a balance the card, maybe. Better for McGregor.
Yeah.
I don't know what Floyd Mayweather's perspective on it was. But, they agreed to it at the end of the day, but whether he personally did or not, I don't know. I'd be surprised if he did.
I don't know if it's something he sort of said in public, sort of out of bravado, and then it got too far. Or
yeah, I mean, he did say that at one point, didn't he?
Yeah.
He did say, "Well, you can fight at whatever weight you want."
Yeah, maybe there's something tactical in it.
I think that was quite a while ago.
Yeah, I think it was quite a while ago. But maybe there's something tactical in it as well. Maybe he believes he's a very skilled boxer. He believes it's going to help him to knock the other guy out. I mean, it could be as simple as that.
Yeah.
But it doesn't seem that
he should be faster with the lighter gloves.
Yeah,
so maybe if in his he's going to be 40, or he is 40 now. He'll be 40 on the day of the fight. So he's slightly older. He's inevitably going to have got slower. Maybe lowering the weight of the gloves just brings him back up to a speed at which he's more used to.
Yeah.
He thinks that extra bit of speed is going to help him.
Yeah.
He's already super fast. In his prime, he was super fast.
Yeah, ridiculous.
So if he's dropped a little bit, that just brings him down to normal person speed, or normal super
down to
athlete
human speed. Yeah. Yeah.
Not normal person speed.
Well, I'm the same age as Floyd Mayweather, and
you're in just as good a shape.
Yeah, I think probably am. You probably find it hard to tell us apart. I would imagine if we stood next to each other.
I reckon so.
Yeah, no need laughing. no need laughing about that. That's but yeah. Look, I mean, one of the other things I wanted to address within this session as well. I mean, one of the things I find interesting here is the notion in this contest and in this build-up. What is sportsmanship? I'm going to rephrase that. What is sports personship? What is games personship? And what is deviancy? Yeah. I think it's a fascinating thing. Now, I think we'd all agree that if they go in there and McGregor head kicks him, or, for example, one of them gets caught doping, or one of them gets caught match fixing, we'd all agree that's deviancy. It's a deviant behaviour. But where in this contest does sportsmanship and games, the line between those two things lie? Because it's really hard to see it.
Yeah, I don't know. And you have to also pull out of that what's real and what's for show.
I agree.
You know, somebody could argue that all of what's happened so far is gamesmanship. All of the standing up and
slapping on the head.
Yeah, all of that
chucking
stuff,
money about.
Yeah, you could argue it's gamesmanship. I don't know. Maybe it is just selling the fight.
Yeah.
They no doubt won't see that as gamesmanship.
Yeah.
Gamespersonship, whatever.
I think it's okay to say sportsmanship and gamesmanship. It's not that we don't. We're trying to be very, very correct. It's the terms we use.
But so they won't see that as gamesmanship. They're going to be talking to each other throughout the fight. McGregor definitely will be.
Yes, he will.
Mayweather won't be quiet, I doubt. So that's equivalent to the slip in cricket, saying something to the batsman.
Mm-hmm.
Is it gamesmanship?
Batsperson.
The batswoman.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's kind of the same. People consider that gamesmanship.
Yeah.
I don't know at what point it becomes gamesmanship or sportsmanship. It's part of the sport for me.
Yeah. Officially, it works like this: sportspersonship or sportsmanship would be considered to be a behaviour which was within the rules and within the etiquette of the game or the sport that's been taken part in. Gamesmanship is still within the rules. So, for example, it's forcing your way through. It's not breaking the rules. My knowledge of Queensberry rules probably needs some development, but it's using a clinch or a hold to expose a part of the body and then to strike it. You're kind of manipulating the situation, but you're not breaking the rules.
Well, it wouldn't surprise me if McGregor did that.
Yeah, I think it's very, very likely.
It's definitely going to happen.
Underhooks.
He's not going to go in and box.
No.
So you're definitely going to see some clinches.
Yeah.
Because that's where he's going to be stronger.
Yeah, he should have the advantage. Although I've read that Mayweather's very good in the clinch.
I'm sure he is. But
yeah. But so for me, I think it's interesting to see what is etiquette in boxing.
Yeah.
Because it seems to me like insulting one another is still etiquette. It's absolutely normal.
That's fine.
That's fine. It's where you cross certain lines. And then you see, okay, they haven't broken the rules, but they've gone into an area where people don't like it. Now, there was an ethnic kind of slur claimed by the Mayweather camp. I think McGregor. I'm not sensitive to this one because it's not a term that I've really heard before. But I think McGregor referred to him as a boy, which I think has a very strong historical context.
So Mayweather was dancing or doing some shadow boxing or something, and McGregor said, "Dance for me, boy."
Oh, okay.
And immediately changed it to "Dance for me, son."
Right.
And so I think there was an element. I don't see it as racist. I don't think McGregor meant it as racist. But probably as soon as he said it, thought somebody might take that as racist.
See,
so I'll change it to.
I don't get because I'm not sensitive enough, presumably, to sort of American culture. I don't know where that is an offensive term from. But
no, I can. The only thing I can think of is it's a slavery thing.
Yeah, that's my assumption as well.
A white slave owner saying "boy" to the slave.
Exactly. So I'm assuming that McGregor has roughly this. I guess he's lived in the States quite a lot though, so maybe he is aware of it. And like, if he switched it, but it's very interesting because you see obviously what's happened there. I mean, I think we'd say racism would be deviancy. There's no question about that. But you see whether it's that, or I know there were other things where they, McGregor referred to him as not being able to read as well. I think that's where you see the line of etiquette. It's like you can slur each other, but as soon as you say something which is somehow on the other side of that line, it goes into gamesmanship and people don't like it.
He also said something very similar to, I think it was Nate Diaz, about not being able to count. So I don't know whether if he was fighting somebody white, he may have said exactly the same thing.
Yeah, I'm not. I
don't think he meant any of that as
I'm not
racist.
even putting that into with regard to ethnicity. For me, that was just it has a level of offence which goes beyond acceptable sportsmanship into the gamesmanship. I mean, trash talk is a very is historically a very, very typical or very recognisable part of boxing and MMA more recently. But there seems to be certain things where, and you can't even necessarily define where the line is, that once you cross over the line, people get really upset about it.
Yeah. And there's an element of desensitization as well, isn't there? The fact that this is so much more in people's eye, and the violence is more in people's eye, the racism probably is, I guess,
Yeah.
compared to 100 years ago, 50 years ago, maybe not 50, but so maybe there's an element of you have that gamesmanship line has to be pushed back to keep people interested, to keep people thinking that they're actually going at each other. If they were being very friendly about it, it's hardly much of a
in that 4-city
build-up.
tour. There's no doubt whatsoever that the line was pushed there.
Yeah.
I mean, there were countless insults. They were telling each other to dance. They were calling it. I mean, it got quite silly. It was funny.
Yeah,
but
it's entertainment, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's the
theatre. It was entertaining. I'm not saying it's to everybody's taste. The other thing I thought is interesting in this sort of conversation as well is if we look at deviancy as a concept, we often think about the things about deviancy I mentioned before. We think about violence, doping. We think about match fixing, these kind of things. Of course, that's all what we'd call very negative deviancy. There's no question that if McGregor was caught for doping or whatever, or Mayweather, or one of them struck the other in a face-off or whatever, everyone would condemn that. There's no question about that. But there's another form of deviancy that might be at play here, and that's overtraining. So we call this kind of positive deviancy. You train so much that you don't allow yourself to perform at its peak. And I'm very interested to see how that transpires, because it must have been very, very tempting for McGregor to train continuously for this fight with the amount of learning he had to do, the amount of preparation he had to do. And I'm wondering how he's managed that environment, and whether he's managed to allow his body time to recover and to rest. I've heard and read lots of stories, but he's been doing new, almost daily 12-round bouts for people. Is that too much, for example? I think it's an interesting conversation.
Yeah. Well, we'll probably never know, will we? Exactly how much he's done and how much his body can take. But you would hope that he's got a good enough team around him and that he's sensible enough to manage his training load. I think the other thing, going back to the more negative deviancy, is those things, the match fixing, or if there's any sort of paying people off or whatever might go on, that that's kind of outright deviance. It's verging on it's cheating. It's that. But there was the case of I can't remember who Muhammad Ali was fighting, but he had a little tear in his glove, and his coach, whose name I can't remember, noticed he was getting tired, and when he sat down in the corner, just like pulled the glove, ripped the seam a little bit further, apparently, and so they had to stop the fight for a bit to get new gloves and new wraps. So that was, I don't know. To me, that's more deviancy. It's like just seeing the opportunity and going, right, I can get an extra rest.
Don't they do something very similar with striking the opponent in the balls, basically? Wouldn't that also have the same impact? Like, I'm sure sometimes it's done because they get annoyed or they just want to hurt them or whatever. But presumably that would be quite a smart way to accidentally strike someone in that area
to get a longer rest.
Because they often take 2-3 minutes to recover from that. Yeah. And then sometimes the rules don't work. Sometimes the rules can be exploited, and that's probably a good definition of gamesmanship. You exploit the rules to your advantage and to the fullest degree. And there's some subtle ways of doing that, and there's some very, very obvious ways. I think it's akin in some ways to, I see it loads in football these days, in association in soccer, where someone who's got a sort of a ban pending with one more yellow card, and then they know the next game is not a big game, so they deliberately get a yellow card, and you see it all the time. So this kind of management of the environment, and that, I didn't know that about the Ali contest. I didn't know. Yeah,
I can't remember his coach's name. D'Angelo, I think.
Yeah,
somebody D'Angelo.
Yeah.
And there's no footage of it.
Wouldn't it also, if you unwrap the tape a bit?
Yeah, I guess so.
To get them recovered, it probably could work as well potentially. No, I've never thought about that before. I've seen that happen a lot of times with the tape. But it's actually kind of an interesting point, because you could use that to very specifically to your own advantage. I want to put something else in here, because it doesn't really fit into this deviancy point. But one of the things I think is potentially at play here is that, and it's just one of my little predictions here. McGregor has kind of quite a sensitive cut tendency over his right eye. I'm just wondering if that's going to play a part in this contest.
Maybe. So you've got that. Mayweather's got, I say, weak hands.
Yes.
He hasn't got weak hands compared to me. pretty hard. But
compared to us, he's Terminator.
I'm pretty sure. But yeah, he ices his hands a lot. He has regular treatment on his hands. So that maybe is going to play a part as well.
For me, that was the greatest part of the entire four stop tour, where they I think it was on the first day they faced off, and McGregor was just whispering, just saying to him, Do you do your hands hurt in the cold? It's so clever.
Yeah,
it's so clever. It's such a simple insult. Just picking at that kind of old man spot. I know. I'm genuinely fascinated by this. I hope people who object to the kind of the violence aspect of the trash talk, I hope they give it a chance. By the way, I'm not trying to sell on commission here, I think, but I just have this feeling we're gonna see something. Just have this feeling we're gonna see something iconic. I have the feeling we're gonna, and I might be badly wrong, but I have the feeling that those things that my dad tells me about Ali, for example, and the experiences that he remembers, I just got a feeling we're about to embark on something. I don't want to say equivalent because people get annoyed with me, but there's something in this that I think is going to be very, very memorable. I'm fascinated. Now, are you going to be able to watch it? Because I'm
at a wedding.
Yeah, so you got to behave yourself at the wedding.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I would like to.
I'll just stay up really late at the wedding.
Stay up really late at the wedding and just get it.
Yeah, because it's. I think the card starts at about 11 o'clock UK time.
Well, we got 5, 6, 7.
6 contests. I was surprised they didn't have a more mixed undercard because it's all boxing.
Yeah.
Some interesting. One
female.
Contests. One female. Yeah. But I was surprised they didn't. Have MMA featured on that. I really thought they'd have octagon and.
It would have been nice too. Would have been good.
Yeah, it would. I mean,
a bit more airtime.
Yeah, I think it would be interesting. I would definitely encourage more people to tune into some MMA. I only know the UFC. I don't know Bellator, for example, particularly well. I've been looking at it now for about 18 months, and I found it a really fascinating sport. Nowhere near what I thought was going to be. They've done a magnificent job commercially to go with what they've done. As I said before, they've done a magnificent job on the gender equality as well, which I really respect them for. And it's a fascinating sport. I have some real favourites now. I really like Holly Holm. I mentioned her earlier. She's fantastic. Obviously, McGregor's doing a really good job. There's a male fighter at the lowest weight limit. I want to say, what is the? I can't remember what it is now. His nickname is Mighty Mouse, Demetrius Johnson. And I really recommend people to have a look. I mean, athletically, he's just phenomenal, and really encourage people to have a look at that. I don't get so interested in like the heavyweight stuff. John Jones has come back and has done well in the light heavyweight.
Who's the other one?
Daniel Cormier. Yeah, well, they fought a couple of weeks ago,
Yeah.
and Jones beat him with a knockout, kicked him in the head, basically.
It's kind of similar to boxing. The heavyweight boxing is an acquired taste, I think. It's
Need
kind
personalities.
of slow. It's slow and big lumping punches.
Yeah.
Just watching two people just stand and what's that game? We had the Sock'em robots or something.
I don't. Yeah.
People just hitting each other.
Yeah.
There's been some great heavyweight boxers and great bouts. So not to undermine it, but when you get down to this sort of weight of McGregor and Mayweather, then you get an element of power as well as the speed and the athleticism as well.
Yeah. We're gonna the next show we're going to do on this one, we're going to look at the psychological aspects of this, and just so people are aware of what we consider to be psychological, we are going to look at sort of sports psychology. We are going to look at character and personality. We are going to look at attitudes. We are going to look at attributions. We are going to look at arousal, anxiety, confidence, emotional control. We're going to look at all those things. But we also want to look at kind of like the skill acquisition aspect of this as well. And I'm really fascinated to talk about the learning models that are in place here and whether we can explain what is going to or what might happen in relation to those learning models as well. I mean, I think it's fascinating to talk about transfer of learning in this context as well. Can MMA skills transfer over, for example? We're going to talk about those things. So we're going to talk a lot about operant conditions, social learning, gestaltism. And I think it's going to be a really fascinating conversation. But I kind of want to lead into that before we finish this one. I want to ask you about motivation. Why do you think each of these fighters are doing this?
It's hard to deny there's a lot of money involved.
Yeah, I agree.
I think there's a massive extrinsic external factor of money.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know the situation of both the guys. Mayweather maybe needs money to fuel the lifestyle he's leading.
It's possible.
McGregor loves money, is openly he's very open about that and likes the extravagant lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
So there's definitely that factor, but I think there's something deeper as well with both of them. McGregor loved when he won the double title, and if he could add this, that would be like the cherry on the cake. And if he does that, if he wins this, he's going to shoot to stratospheric stardom.
Some people are arguing he will become the biggest icon on the planet if he wins this contest.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely going to be an element of that there's a fame and but I think for both of them, it's more, there's an element of intrinsic kind of doing it for themselves. Maybe Mayweather was provoked, was challenged to do this. He's the old guy in the ring. Has he still got it? He always said he wanted to be the best boxer in the world, the best fighter in the world, and is up until whenever it is, 26th, until he proves it again. So maybe there's an element of proving it to himself, maybe proving it to everybody else. So I think they've definitely both got a deep entrenched intrinsic thing to it, but there's definitely the money factor as well.
I think one of the things that could be very, very decisive here is whether or not Mayweather needed to come back. Now, I don't know whether he did or not financially. I know he had some tax issues. He spends a lot of money. I don't know what he earns from his investments. I'm assuming he does well out of that. But if he needed to come back to fuel 40 more years of his life in the way he lives it, because he was going to run out of money, if he's coming back, if that's a driver or a significant driver, like he had no choice in that context, I think that is very concerning on his side. Because if he didn't want to come back because he wanted to box or just top up that bank balance, then I think there's a big issue for him there. I think he could come unstuck, because I don't think going in with McGregor is any kind of joke, any kind of easy run. I think there's he is a savage.
Yeah, far from it. But I don't think there's any doubt that both of these guys think they're going to win.
Yeah, McGregor believes he's going to win. There's no question.
100%. Both of them are convinced that they're both going to win. Hopefully, neither of them are underestimating the other one, and nobody's going to be complacent. McGregor definitely won't be as the underdog, but they definitely both think they're the best fighter in the world. And this is, and aside from any accidents that happen or somebody just gets knocked out in the first 10 seconds, hopefully we're going to see a really good fight where we are going to find out who's the best. Yes, it's going to be good.
I think on McGregor's side, I think you highlighted something there that's interesting. I agree. I think there is a status or fame or recognition side for him, which is very, very strong. He's definitely financially motivated. There's no question about that. I've read things that his objective in his career is to earn $1 billion, is to be a billionaire. But I think he's also aiming to be an icon, to replicate or even surpass what the likes of Muhammad Ali have achieved, for example. And lots of people say, oh, you can't compare McGregor to Ali. And I agree, right now you can't. And lots of people say you can't, because of the behaviours of McGregor. He's a trash talk. And anyone who believes that you can't make that comparison, go back and look at some of the things Muhammad Ali said, especially to Joe Frazier. Oof.
Yeah.
I mean,
Big Ugly Bear.
I think it was Gorilla.
Yeah.
It was nasty. Yeah. What we would today's world we would consider to be deeply racist. Yeah. So you can't separate them on that side. But of course, the accomplishments are not the same at the moment. The other thing I think is going to be interesting from the psychological perspective, and again we'll sort of just touch on this as we move towards the second session next week. McGregor has lost before. He knows what that is. He knows what that feels like. Now, I can't decide whether that's an advantage or a disadvantage to him. He's never lost by being struck. He's never lost in boxing. Yeah. He's been lost. He's lost on the ground 3 times through submission. So I'm very interested to see whether that plays a role for him or not. Maybe the weakness of that is on Mayweather's side, the fact that he's never experienced loss. A loss in professional fight. He lost at amateur level.
The Olympics. Yeah.
That's right. Well, he claims he didn't. He claims he got cheated in that semi-final. But
there was an interesting clip of that, him talking about that, where he said that, and I can't work out what he actually meant by it. It was slightly coded, but it was that he lost the fight, and he said something like, "I got over it, and I left it. I got the bronze." And he said, "If you don't get gold, you get silver or bronze." That was his attitude. It wasn't like, "Oh, I came third, that's all right." It was, "I didn't get gold, it was a failure." And then he said, "Oh, I left it in Atlanta." And I don't know whether he meant metaphorically he left losing and then was going to come back and just win everything, or whether he literally left his medal there.
Yeah.
I kind of like the idea that he left his medal there.
Yeah. Yeah. There's been a few examples of that. I wonder if part of it is I left that experience of losing there.
I think you probably.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
A lot of things were left in those Atlanta games. The reputation of the Olympics, the entire economy of Atlanta was left there as well because it nearly died.
Yeah.
That went badly. I don't know if I just about remember that Olympics. I would have been 10 at the time, and no, hang on. Where was that? 1996. I'd been 20 at the time, so I do remember it. Now I've decided I remember it. But they had massive problems there. They couldn't even get athletes to the events on time, and it was all hell broke loose and that. And that I believe as well. That was really the turning point for the IOC. They cleaned themselves up as well after that process, a bit like maybe what FIFA's going through at the moment. They after that Atlanta games. But anyway, getting back to McGregor Mayweather, I'm going to put my head on the block, and I'm going to say I've been thinking about it in this conversation. Who do I believe is going to win? I believe McGregor's going to win.
Yeah.
I believe he's going to do it. I don't know if I can justify that belief. I've just got a feeling. He's amazing at so many things. Again, we're going to talk about this in the psychological one, but Mayweather is a master at responding to certain boxing stimuli. If McGregor doesn't present those stimuli, but somehow hacks boxing and presents completely different ones, then how does Mayweather respond to that?
Yeah. The flip side to that is Mayweather's going to be incredibly fast at picking up on what McGregor does. So if McGregor does something slightly odd, Mayweather's going to see it straight away and have it and know exactly what he's planning. Yeah. He sees McGregor in that position, then same. So McGregor's got to be very creative, very innovative, very different.
Yeah, and again, we'll talk a bit about schema theory with regard to that in our second psychological session. But again, there's something about McGregor. There's some X factor. There's something around him. I can't quite put my finger on it. And I come back to the point I made before. He is, I think, the most spectacular mover that I've seen in my adult life in all of the sport that I've been involved with, watched, coached, been interested in. He is the most impressive person I've ever seen. Yeah. So that's just one person's opinion. Now, so I'm putting him up there with Messi, Serena, with Federer, with Bolt. I'm putting him up there with those guys. Now, I might be wrong, but if he is that and he somehow manages to apply his skills in a way that is relevant in boxing and surprises and limits Mayweather, I think we're in for something truly fascinating. The other thing is he's massive. Mayweather's a big guy. McGregor is a big guy. He's significantly bigger than Mayweather. I think
his reach is going to be the key factor. Yeah. He's an inch or two taller than Mayweather. His reach is 2 inches longer. So that's definitely going to play a factor. Combined with the fact that he's exquisite at timing and range anyway, to have the extra reach is going to be a big factor. I think if it was MMA, you give it to McGregor every day.
Oh, there's no
if
question.
It was if Mayweather was 3-4 years younger, you give it to him every day.
Yeah,
but we've got this weird middle ground where there's a weakness in Mayweather's armor and there's a weakness in McGregor's armor, and you've got this kind of weird hybrid mix of things, which hopefully is going to produce something really
going to kind of explode on the 26th, and we'll see what happens. I'm very interested to see what kind of poses and stances McGregor takes on.
It'll be different to boxing.
Very different. I think he's going to take a whole range of stances, isn't he, to approach the contact area.
Yeah,
I think there's going to be he's going to present a lot of different information too. Maybe the question is that he can present that information. Does it have any impact? I mean, if it doesn't have any impact, it doesn't make any difference.
Yeah. My prediction is slow first couple of rounds.
Yep.
Scope each other out. They're both defensive, so I don't know who's going to make the first move, who's going to attack hard first. I don't know. Slow first couple of rounds, and then from there it could go either way. The other thing that could happen is you get one magical punch from either one.
That's true,
and it ends it all.
Well, okay. If we're making specific predictions, I'm going to make one. I'm going to make a prediction of Mayweather down in the first, knocked out in the sixth.
Down in the first, knocked out in the sixth. Wow.
That's a big prediction.
Big prediction.
No, I've got nothing to back that up with.
I reckon first four are uneventful.
You think?
Yeah.
Interesting. So you've been in the combat scenario. I never have. I literally just an onlooker. It's kind of interesting.
I'm defensive when I fight, but I'm orthodox. So I'm more like Mayweather, if I could possibly say
that.
Yeah. So orthodox and defensive.
Apart from your body,
and my speed, reaction time.
Apart from everything about you, just like it. Yeah.
I literally stand with the same foot forwards.
Yeah. Good stuff. Well, look, we'll come to wrapping this up. So we're back on. We're back on Monday? I think is that the plan, Marta? We're back on Monday. We're going to talk about the psychological aspect of this performance. We hope this has been useful for someone. I mean, more importantly, even if it's not, we've enjoyed doing it and we wanted to do it, so we're doing it for ourselves, and that's ultimately what matters to us. We might be releasing a couple of resources around this show as well. So we might be putting a few questions out so that students can sort of almost use it as a bit of a comprehension exercise potentially. So we might be doing that, but we've got to review it first and figure out what the hell we talked about, and we'll go from there. So we'll tune out. Big thank you for me. Thanks for tuning in, guys. And yeah, my ears are very sweaty, so I'm gonna.
Warm in here.
Yeah, it's really warm in here. So we're gonna call it a day. Cheers, guys. All the best. Look after yourselves.